Okay, so here we go. Lecture number 1, doing remote instruction. So today we're going to start into the second half of chapter 24. And oops, let me get this shared with you. Share screen. Okay. So this is a slide we showed last time before spring break. And it kind of looks at some of the different characteristics of animals that we had talked about. So make sure you definitely look over that and review some of those terms and things that we have talked about before. Like animals that have tissues versus no tissues, symmetry, tissue layers, mesoderm, endoderm, exoderm, those types of things. Okay, so we're moving into the next half of this, and I'm going to jump way ahead. Have you guys just review the first part of chapter 24. And we ended last time talking about the flatworms right before we did the planarial lab. Okay, so we are on phylum Annelida. Okay, so phylum Annelida, which is going to be the segmented worms. And these would be things like earthworms. And if you look at the outside of an earthworm, you notice they have those little rings, okay? Those rings represent different segments of the worm. And so this segmentation is what we're seeing when we look at those rings on the outside. On the inside, however, each of the segments contain identical copies of nerves, muscles, and all of those internal structures. So each segment has the exact same material in it, or same structures in it. Annelids have coelomate body plans. Remember, that's a true body cavity surrounded by mesoderm, okay, where the tube is surrounded by mesoderm. And they also have inside of that coelom, is fluid. And that body cavity is fluid filled. And that fluid serves as what we call a hydrostatic skeleton. Okay, hydrostatic basically means fluid or water pressure. And so the fluid pressure pushing on the outside of those body cavities inside the earthworms or other annelids basically holds it out and basically gives that animal its structure. And it's a framework, much like our skeleton, that muscles can push and pull against to help with movement. Okay. Annelids or earthworms, as an example, have very well developed organ systems. They have what's called a closed circulatory system, would be like humans. If you think about our circulatory system, our blood is pumped by the heart through veins and arteries, okay? Blood does not, unless there's an injury, blood does not leave those veins and arteries, those vessels. And so the blood stays within that system. So it's a closed system. We'll talk in a little while about some open circulatory systems, but the earthworms have a closed system in which the blood stays within the blood vessels, okay? So in the closed circulatory system, blood remains confined into the heart and the blood vessels. And an earthworm, for example, has 5 pairs of little pumps or little kind of primitive type hearts. And they also have excretory organs, which in us would be like a kidney. Be the kidney in humans. In the annelids, these are called nephridia, Nephridia, which are very primitive type kidneys to help excrete the wastes. Here is just a diagram of an earthworm or a typical annelid, and you can see the rings, the segments here, and each segment's going to have part of the body cavity, a blood vessel, digestive structure, reproductive structures, the ventral nerve cord. We're going to see that in few of the different animals. We have a dorsal nerve cord, meaning on our back. This would be the dorsal side, the back side, and this would be the ventral side, like our stomach side if we were laying down. So insects and earthworms, they have a nerve cord that goes along the bottom or underneath side, the ventral side. And humans have a nerve cord, our spinal cord is actually surrounded by bone, the vertebrae, the spine, on the back, the dorsal side. So anyway, there's some differences there. They have a very primitive brain, a crop, gizzard, and intestine. These are all digestive. Digestive organs, okay? And then you can see their 5 hearts right there. Okay, some other annelids include also, besides the earthworm, oligochaetes, polychaetes, and leeches. Okay, this one here is a picture of a leech. And leeches are kind of neat. They're used in medicine sometimes. Special leeches are used in medicine, like if a person lost a finger and they needed to put it back on and try to reattach it. Sometimes they'll put leeches on that dismembered appendage as they're trying to reattach it to help blood flow return back into that organ or to that appendage. So leeches are kind of cool. If you ever get them on you, though, it's kind of freaky. So that was phylum Annelida. The next phylum is phylum Mollusca. Okay, and those are going to be the mollusks. And mollusks have shells. Okay, and I'm going to just apologize up front for the rest of the semester for doing this about my handwriting on the screen. So sorry, it's not real good anyway, but terrible on here, so I apologize. So mollusks are things like clams, scallops, those types of things, snails and things like that. Mollusks have a circulatory system that is an open circulatory system, so that's a little bit different than what we would have, or the annelids like the earthworm. They have what's called a hemocoel. Hemo, or heme, refers to blood. And then remember the word coelomate or pseudocoelomate, that means cavity. So they basically have a blood cavity. They don't have blood in their closed veins and arteries, blood vessels like we do. They have a cavity, an open space within their body that blood, I'm going to put this in kind of quotations because it's actually called hemolymph. That's what their blood's actually called, but it's sort of like blood. And if you've had A&P before, lymph is extra fluid outside of the cells. So it's kind of a mixture between blood and lymph that we would see in humans. But anyway, their quote unquote blood or hemolymph dumps into this cavity, this hemocoel, and it bathes the organs directly. So for example, the crop is going to be bathed, is basically like swimming kind of in blood. Okay. And that's called an open circulatory system because the blood leaves the vessels and is not just contained in that. Mollusks also have what's called a mantle. And that's basically a body extension where the gills are. And if they have shells, it's where the shell is secreted from. It's basically the structure that makes the shell, if they have one. And here's a typical body plan. Here's the shell, you can see. the stomach, the heart in here, a primitive kidney. The gonads are going to be the reproductive structures, this gray thing here. Intestine kind of passes through there. Here's some of the gills, the mantle, which secretes the shell, and the mouth. Now, here we have what are called adductor muscles, or some here and here. For those that are what we call bivalves, or have two shells, like a clam, if you've ever picked up a clam and tried to open it, it's really hard to pry them open. It's because it's these really strong adductor muscles that if they get scared or sense danger or whatever, they will close, and those muscles are very, very strong. So there's 3 groups of mollusks that we'll talk about: gastropods, bivalves, and cephalopods. Gastropods, bivalves, and cephalopods. cephalopods. So to kind of help look at what these words mean, gastro refers to the stomach. Okay, and pod, or poda, refers to the foot. It literally means the foot or appendage. So gastropods have one quote unquote foot, and they would include things like snails and slugs. Okay, those are gastropods because this area down here would be their foot. And so they're basically stomach crawlers. Their foot is where their stomach is going to be. And they crawl on their muscular foot. And then they're going to be, a lot of them will be protected by a shell. Slugs, of course, do not have shells, but snails do. And they can retreat up into their shell if they think they're threatened. Gastropods feed using what's called a radula, R-A-D-U-L-A. And that's basically this, it's like a tongue. Those are quotations. A tongue that has little scraping mechanisms on there to help scrape algae from rocks and other places, plant material and so forth. And if we were in class, I would have you guys go over and take a look at our snail in the aquarium, because you can kind of see the little structures where they go, and they basically just lick the side of the aquarium, and they have little rasps on their tongue. Let's just call that a raspy tongue, where they lick off or scrape off algae and different food materials. And so there is what's called a snail radula video in D2L that I want you to watch. So you can stop the video, this video now, and go into D2L and go check out the snail radula. It just takes a few seconds to go over there and watch it licking the side of the glass. Okay, so pause this video, go watch that snail video, and come back. Okay. All right, so gastropods, to respire or to breathe, use gills. The gills in those that have shells are underneath the shell, and gases can also diffuse readily, okay, or enter the bodies of gastropods through the skin. So oxygen, for example, can just diffuse right straight into the skin and get into the cells that need that oxygen. Okay, if they, like slugs that live completely on land, they have a very simple lung versus gills. Bivalves, okay, bi we know means two, and this is basically shells. They have 2 shells, and they're going to be filter feeders, so they're going to filter out plankton and other materials. And bivalves include scallops, oysters, mussels, clams, all those things that have those 2 different shells. Okay, and it has that flexible hinge and those strong adductor muscles that hold that shell closed if there's a threat. Cephalopods are the third type of mollusk that we're going to talk about. Cephalo means head. Okay. And then pod, again, means foot. So cephalopod literally means head foot. And these are going to be things like octopuses, squids, cuttlefish, nautiluses. And basically their head, oops, come back, is their quote unquote foot. Okay. All cephalopods are carnivores and they all live in the ocean. And these animals, their foot has basically developed into tentacles that extend from their head. That's why they're called cephalopods. And they also have well-developed sensory structures. They can grasp their prey with suction cups on their tentacles and then move that prey toward their mouth. Cephalopods are also propelled by jet propulsion. They basically suck water in and shoot water out of their body and use that to propel them through the water, and they can move very fast. And these are the only ones in the gastropod phyla, I'm sorry, in the mollusk phyla that have a closed circulatory system. All the others have an open. Cephalopods also have a highly developed brain and, like we said, sensory systems. They have a very complex eye, and their brain is really large and complex, and they have the ability to learn and remember. Okay, so I have another video I want you to go and watch. So stop this lecture video and switch back over to D2L and find the octopus in jar video and watch that and learn about how the cephalopods or the octopus, for example, can learn. Okay. The next phylum is phylum Arthropoda. And let's see, I guess I'll just make this all on one lecture video. I was going to split it up to two, but we'll just do it all in one and then we'll be done with it. Next phylum is Arthropoda. Remember, as we're going through these, the ones that are in parentheses and in italics is going to be the phylum name. Okay. So arthropods, or animals in phylum Arthropoda, are the most diverse and abundant animals. So if we're looking at number of species in a particular phylum, arthropods takes the cake. They have the most number of species, and they're also very, very diverse, very different from each other. Phylum Arthropoda is going to include insects, arachnids like spiders, myriapods, and then crustaceans. Okay, and there's over 1 million arthropod species that have been discovered, and they believe there's many, many more insect species, especially like in the rainforests and so forth, that haven't yet even been discovered. Arthropods have paired appendages, okay, and they're also jointed appendages or jointed legs. And if you think of the word arthropod, okay, pod we know means like feet or foot or appendages. Arthro, okay, what do you think that means? You've heard of arthritis before. Itis means inflammation of, okay, so what do you think arthritis is? Inflammation of the joints, right? So arthropod literally means jointed feet or jointed legs. And so arthropods have paired jointed appendages and also an exoskeleton. or a skeleton on the outside. It's kind of like armor. Um, that outer layer, the outer skeleton, is made up of chitin, like we saw with fungi. Okay. So those arthropods all have that chitin exoskeleton. And that exoskeleton is going to be a really good attachment site for muscles, just like our bones are. But the exoskeleton is also very thin and flexible to allow those appendages to move. So the exoskeleton has some rigidity, but it's also a little bit flexible, so it can be strong and protective, but also a little bit flexible so it can move. Now with the arthropods, this, especially insects, that exoskeleton needs to be shed or molted every so often so that that insect can grow. So they outgrow their exoskeleton. It needs to be shed and then replaced. This molting process, however, is a little bit inefficient because it uses a lot of energy and leaves the animal vulnerable. And you don't have this slide in your notes, but I wanted to put it in here. This is a cicada or a locust shedding out. And you can see, if you've ever seen a locust shell or exoskeleton, you know it's kind of hard and yet pliable. But right now, that exoskeleton hasn't hardened, and you can see how this one would be very, very vulnerable to predators, and it's not very protected for a few more days yet. Arthropods also have specialized segments or portions or areas of their body that have different functions. Okay, so their segments are specialized for different functions like sensory functions, feeding functions, and movement. Okay, so if we look at this next slide, here are 3 of these segments in insects. Okay, the first one is going to be the head, and that's where the sensory organs are going to be usually attached, like the antenna and the eyes. Then we have the thorax or the chest kind of region, and that's going to be used for movement. The thorax is where the wings, this is kind of the dividing part here, but the wings, the legs, those are all going to attach to the thorax. And then the abdomen would contain like the digestive organs and reproductive organs and so forth. And some arthropods have 2 segments called basically the cephalothorax and the abdomen. So spiders, for example, will have a cephalothorax where the head and the thorax are kind of fused together. They're basically one structure. And so that's where the spider's legs will attach, is the cephalothorax, and then they'll have an abdomen. But insects and most of the crustaceans and so forth will have those 3 different areas. And when you guys do the grasshopper dissection lab, you'll get to see those structures a little bit more in depth. Okay, getting gas exchange, getting oxygen into the body is going to be really important so they can move and fly and eat and do all of those things. And so arthropods that live in the water, like crustaceans, like shrimp and crayfish, will use gills. But the terrestrial or earth-dwelling arthropods are going to exchange gas by either lungs or what we call tracheae. Oops, EAE, TRACHEAE. And we'll show some pictures of that, I think, when we get to the you'll see that in the dissection video. Most arthropods have open circulatory systems, so they'll have a hemocoel, that cavity that contains the quote unquote blood. Most arthropods have a really good sensory system and nervous system. A lot of them will have compound eyes. Okay, like these here with this particular fly that senses light. They can also have chemical and other tactile, like quote unquote smell senses and feeling. The grasshopper you'll hear in the dissection video can actually detect sound. And so they have a fairly well-developed sensory system. Insects are the only flying invertebrates. Okay, none of the other invertebrates can fly. Of course, the vertebrates, like birds and so forth, can. Let's see. So insects are part of class Insecta. Okay, so kingdom, phylum, Arthropoda, class Insecta. And the number of known insects is 850,000, which is a lot compared to a lot of other organisms. Insects will have a single pair of antennae, 3 pairs of legs or 6 legs, and then typically 2 pairs of wings. Okay, and their ability to fly has really helped with their success in evolving and becoming successful organisms. We mentioned that some organisms in this area, like the insects, have to molt, but they also undergo metamorphosis. And I know you guys have probably studied that since kindergarten with butterflies and caterpillars and pupa and all of that. In a lot of insect species, they undergo complete metamorphosis. Okay, which is basically a change in body type. So they'll start out as an egg, and then that egg will hatch into a larva, which is kind of like the worm or maggot in this example. The caterpillar, that larva then eats and eats and eats, right? That's the feeding stage, where it gets a lot of its nutrients and energy. Then it enters the pupa stage where it doesn't need to eat, undergoes a lot of changes during that dormant period, and then develops into that adult. Some insects, however, do not undergo complete metamorphosis. Basically, this metamorphosis, complete or incomplete, describes a developmental type. So going from the egg to the adult, how does that happen? How does it grow and develop? Okay, so some organisms like grasshoppers undergo a gradual metamorphosis instead of like huge changes between like caterpillar and butterfly and stuff, and that's called incomplete metamorphosis. And basically the young basically looks like a little bitty adult, and they don't change from larva to adult and pupa and so forth. So they really resemble the adult, and then they will grow and molt as they continue on in their development. Another class are the arachnids, or class Arachnida. Okay, these are going to be carnivores and include spiders, mites, ticks, and scorpions. All arachnids have 8 walking legs, or 4 pairs of walking legs, and a lot of times they'll eat a liquid diet of blood, or they'll sting or bite their prey item, and that venom will digest the insides of the prey, and then they will basically drink that liquid. So here's some examples, a couple of different types of ticks, scorpion, and spider. Myriapods are like centipedes and millipedes. I don't know if some of you guys live around here, you've probably seen these centipedes. We get these exact, or pretty close to exact ones in my house. They're really big. And then we can have millipedes around here too, but they're very tiny compared to this one. They have lots and lots of legs. They'll have 2 pair of antennae. They have eyes, and then breathe through tracheae, which are basically entrances in through here where oxygen gases are allowed in, and basically are distributed by a very primitive system. The last class of arthropods is going to be class Crustacea. And these are going to be organisms like crabs, crayfish, lobsters, those types of things. These are the only ones that live primarily in water. They're going to also have 2 pairs of sensory antennae. They have compound eyes and breathe with gills. And here's some examples of them. Crabs and barnacles and so forth. Okay. And then that brings us into the next phylum, phylum Nematoda, or the nematodes. And these are the roundworms. And remember, earthworms are round, right? But they are in phylum Annelida, okay, because they're segmented. These worms are not, they do not have segments. Do you see that, how they're different than an earthworm? Okay, and we also talked about flatworms like the planaria and tapeworm and so forth that are in phylum Platyhelminthes. So there's 3 different phyla of worms that we're covering, so try to kind of keep those separate in your mind. Platyhelminthes is flat, Annelida is the segmented worms, and then the roundworms with no segments are the nematodes, or phylum Nematoda. They break down organic matter. They're really good with recycling. And then some of them, the most prominent ones that you may know of, or that we typically know of, are parasites. And they can be about 3 feet long. Okay, so there's a picture of a nematode. Roundworms are pseudocoelomates. So they have that false body, okay, or false body cavity. They're not a true coelomate. They also have a hydrostatic skeleton. They have a non-living cuticle, okay, or an outer layer, an outer skin that helps enclose the body and helps them molt. And they also have basically a simple brain in that head region. An example of a nematode is trichinella, and it causes the disease trichinosis. Okay, this is not this STD trichomoniasis. That's given by a protozoa. It's totally something different. So this trichinosis is not the STD. But basically it is transmitted by people eating infected pork. Remember we talked about the tapeworms and how they form little cysts in the muscle of the animal. Okay, again, just like when we talked about the tapeworm, getting trichinosis in the US anymore, if you're eating meat that's come from the grocery store or gone through either state or USDA inspection, these animals, or these carcasses, will be thrown out. They will not enter the food chain. If you go to other countries though, there is a chance that you could get this roundworm. But even if the meat is infected or there are cysts, if it's cooked properly, it will kill them. So don't freak out that you're going to get trichinosis in the US, and just always make sure you cook your meat well. So that's that disease. And this will take us to our last phylum in the invertebrates. And this is phylum, come back, Echinodermata. And the echinoderms, if we look at these words, derm or dermis means layer or skin, and echino means spiny. Oops, spiny skin. So echinoderm means literally spiny skin. And these are going to be things like sea stars, which used to be called starfish, sea urchins, and those kinds of things. And those little bumps or spines that most of them have is kind of what gives them their name. And these are extensions of their endoskeleton, which is made of calcium carbonate. So they have kind of an internal skeleton, not like bones like ours, but they do have an endoskeleton. They're not vertebrates by any means, but they have that kind of hard skeletal type structure that those spines come from. And here's some examples of the echinoderms. Echinoderm larvae, so the young echinoderms are bilaterally symmetrical. There's only one T in there. Which means they have a left and a right side, but as adults, they are radially symmetrical. So if you don't remember what that means, double check first part of this chapter. They have deuterostome development. Remember, the mouth is the second opening during embryological development. And that is something that the chordates, or the vertebrates that we're going to study in the next chapter, also have. They do not have cephalization, so they don't have a head region either. So there's some similarities with chordates, and there's some similarities with the other invertebrates as well. They're kind of like a animal that has both characteristics. Echinoderms also have a water vascular system. And in a few days, we're going to have a virtual lab looking at the sea star dissection, and we'll get in more to exactly how the water vascular system works. But they have a lot of, on the underside of them, called tube feet, not feed, that help them move around. They're like little baby suction cups. They help them move and circulate substances through their water vascular system. So that system helps with capturing food, getting nutrients and oxygen through, and also helps with their movement. Okay, so this right here is an example of a tube foot. There's one here, one there, one there. Those are all little tube feet. It's eating a mussel. Its mouth is on the underside, and it's trying to remove the insides of that mollusk. Here, this has a ring canal, and we'll see that in the dissection video next week. And then it basically has canals that run to each leg as well, or each foot. And then here's what's called an ampulla. We'll talk about that here in just a second. And then here's the sieve plate. So seawater is going to enter into that sieve plate on the animal's top side, or the upper side, goes into that ring canal. And then that water is then going to go through one of the legs into an area bulb known as the ampulla. And the ampulla is going to be what actually controls water coming in and out. It's going to like force water through or hold it there and make suction. Okay. Now, we talked before, if a starfish or sea star breaks off one of its arms, as long as it has part of that ring canal, it can regenerate. So if it's done properly, a single sea star can regenerate into 5 different ones if each of its legs got broken off. Okay, so I'm also going to have you stop this video here and watch the starfish eating clam video in D2L. So stop the video, watch that, and then come back. Okay, and then just to finish this up, in the next lecture, we're going to talk about the chordates. Okay, and the chordates or phylum Chordata includes vertebrate animals like humans and reptiles and so forth. But they are, and we'll talk about why this is next time, but there are a few chordates that are invertebrates, and those are going to be the sea squirts and the lancets. And this just kind of ties us into the next chapter. We'll look at those at the first part of the chapter 25. Okay, now before we end, I wanted to take you guys to D2L, and I'm going to take you to the content area. Okay, so this video will be posted. If you look over here, there's videos. These are where all of your videos you should have been watching are. These here, down here, snail radula, octopus, starfish. If you hadn't found those, that's where they are. And then what you're going to do for the lab section, we're going to do a virtual lab dissecting grasshoppers. And so if you click on lab assignments and then come over here and click on the virtual grasshopper dissection lab, it pulls up this PDF here. Okay, and it has you go to 2 different websites. You're going to watch a YouTube video with a gentleman dissecting the grasshopper, and as you're watching that video, you're going to answer these, those 8 questions here. I don't know if I can, nope, not marking it up. Okay, so these 8 questions. Okay, type them out into a Word document and then hang on to that. Type out those answers to those questions based on watching that YouTube video. And then you're going to go to this website here. It's an Iowa State University entomology lab, where it's going to bring up an image like this. Okay, and what I want you to do is to take screenshots. Do you see these little buttons down here? Okay, if you click on those buttons, it will show you different organ systems of the grasshopper. So I want you to find the heart, okay, which is going to be part of the circulatory system. You click on circulatory system, look at those structures, and then take a screenshot of it. Take your screenshot and copy it and paste it into the Word document that has your 8 questions from the previous video up here. Okay, then you clear that out, clear off the respiratory, or sorry, the circulatory system, and then go find the ventral nerve cord. Look through those structures, take a screenshot, and so forth. So with all of these 5 structures, each one's going to have their own screenshot. And you can shrink it down. It doesn't have to be a huge screenshot. But you'll have 5 screenshots and the answer to those 8 questions in a Word or PDF or some type of document. Okay, if you want to print it off and take a picture of it, however it works, you will take that document and upload it into assignments, into this Grasshopper virtual lab, and upload it here. This is going to be due, as you can see here, March 26th. So Thursday, March 26th by 11:59 p.m. Okay, so you're going to be watching the lecture video, which hopefully you've just finished, you're going to be doing the Grasshopper virtual lab. And if you go over here into the content area and look at the daily checklists, here's the daily checklist for today. So you make sure you have everything complete you've needed to do for this class period, okay? So read chapter 24, okay? Watch the video, do the virtual lab, okay? There will be a grade for this, and watching the lecture videos will count as your attendance. Lab will be graded. There'll be mastering homework for chapter 24 due on Sunday, just like normal in mastering. And then also, I've been working with some of you guys on your research projects. Your proposal is due in Dropbox by 5:30 today. Okay, so make sure that you get your research proposal done. In just a second, I'll show you where some research or resources are for that. But coming for next week, begin reading the first half or so of chapter 25, which is vertebrate animals, and be working on your research projects. If you go back to table of contents, there is a category for research projects, okay? Read through this, writing a strong hypothesis. Remember to look through the project grading criteria so you know exactly what you need to have for your proposal, okay? Your proposal is gonna have a really good hypothesis written, and this link will tell you what that is. And then also you're going to have your materials and methods and all of that spelled out. Okay, so make sure that you're reading through this and you have a really good proposal, and then you can upload your research proposal here in assignments right there. Okay, so be having all of your assignments done. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. You can email me through D2L or student email. I'll be checking those and having those open and looking through those every day, Monday through Friday. And then also, if you want to call me and ask some questions or anything like that, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 to 10 a.m., I will dedicate being around the phone. You're welcome to call at another time during decent hours. I just may or may not be right next to the phone when you call, okay? So please let me know how this is going for you. Maybe it'd be good if you just sent me an email saying, hey, this worked well, this didn't work well, could you do something different? Just check in with me sometime in the near future and let me know how you're doing. Let me know that you are ready to go, okay? So that finishes up chapter 24, and we will see you soon.